to get this point from just the first 2 verses, if we didn't read the whole book, when we read the 4-chapter book,
Yes.
very short book, we're able to definitively make this statement, and we see it reflected in the first 2 verses. The will of God will be accomplished in the world with or without my compliance.
Amen.
The will of God will be accomplished in the world with or without my compliance. And that may not seem like a big deal yet, but as we read on through this story, that will become increasingly clear. We want to always retain a spirit of humility in recognizing that the will of God will be accomplished in the world with or without my compliance. Now, in the case of Jonah, he had been given a tremendous opportunity to be the vessel through whom God was going to work to do this great thing.
Amen. Yes, sir.
And that's why we should always have a spirit of humility. If you are the minister of a congregation, or if you are serving as an elder or a deacon, or as the wife of an elder or a deacon or a minister, or we're all just laborers in the vineyard.
Yes, sir.
I don't care if you are the CEO.
From the presence of the Lord, and Jonah went, he went down. All right, there's your first down. Keep reading.
And he found the ship going to Tarshish.
All right, and he found the ship going to Tarshish.
So he paid the fare thereof.
He paid the fare thereof
And went down.
and went down. Every time you disobey God, you are going down. You got it? All right, keep on reading. Drop down to verse number 5 for sake of time. Look at this.
Then the mariners were afraid.
The mariners were afraid.
They cried every man.
They cried every man to his God. They were calling out their gods.
And cast forth the wares that were in the ship into the sea. The lightning of them. But Jonah was going.
We don't want to go. A command we don't want to obey. Is it making sense to you? An example we don't want to follow. A message we try to ignore. It's at Nineveh we want to ignore that Nineveh. Your Nineveh could be some bad habit that you have. Your Nineveh could be you are in a bad relationship that you don't want to face. Your Nineveh could be mending a bad relationship. Your Nineveh could be that clock you're punching every day. That job
forced incest and bloodshed and lawlessness and anger and corruption. In other words, it was Sin City. And so Jonah's Nineveh is really kind of thematically connected to Sodom, which is, you know, is another biblical city of envy. In Genesis 18:19, God told Abraham that the outcry of Sodom is so great that he must go down to investigate. Well, similarly, God also sends Jonah to Nineveh, telling him that its evil is so wicked, he has to come up before me in Jonah 1:2. So, of course, we know Jonah, he had no intention of doing what God said, because to him, he thought, these people, they just don't. Because we realize we probably won't reach that age we'd like to reach that we have in mind. You know, 78.87 is today's life expectancy. And as we get older, the fact of death really becomes more and more a reality to us. And we think about it more frequently. It becomes easy for us to become just impatient because we got so many things we want to do and time just keeps flying by. But with God, though, time is not so critical. If 1,000 years is to God as a day, how many in the lifetime of a man? Nothing more than a blink of an eye. Yes. So time is a gift to us, the creation. So we can be thankful.
But I want to thank you for your prayers, in particular Brother Stephen Whitaker, who has been my friend for years. Amen. We don't get to talk a whole lot. I looked in the mail when my wife was there, and he had sent me a card and put $50 in. I said, my goodness, I said, we're talking about friendship. And it wasn't the money, but just the thought. I want to thank all of you for your prayers for me during this time. Let's get busy, okay? Jonah. Again, Brother Thomas Farson, I was talking to somebody out there just a minute ago. there in Colombia. And then Larry Jones, who sang this morning, the Jones family, man, the big family. So we thank God for sparing all of us to be living and families that we have in the church. Jonah chapter number 1, and verses number 1 through 3. Now, let me just say this. Everybody's been preached my sermon already. Last night, Nokomis Rogers was just over here just a minute ago, and just my brother Michael just went all through my sermon. And then Brother Rogers. So I don't know what I have left here, but I'm going to do the best I can to squeeze some orange. I think there's some more orange in this, some more lemon in this lemon. Okay, some more juice in this lemon. But what they gave me was Jonah chapter number 1, verses 1 through 3. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah. And consequences of disobedience. The text has been assigned unto me of Jonah chapter 1, verses 4 through number 12. Thank you, Brother Jordan, for being our clicker. If you don't mind, you can click to the next slide. This great book of Jonah, this book of this 8th century prophet, is a great book, and we've been taught many of the years that this book is about Jonah, but I want to submit unto you all that this great book is not about Jonah. This book is about the grace of God. This book is about God extending His grace not only to His people, but also to others, also to Nineveh. But before we go into the book of Jonah and we go to my text, I seek to be an expository preacher, so we're going to try to preach the text when we get there. But before we go, I want to do a little word study. So what is a cost? I found 3 definitions of a cost. And number 1 is the price or value or equivalent.
Well, but something else if you've been oppressed. So how do you manage it? Not if you're oppressing somebody, but if you are the oppressed. He says in verse number 7, you've got to learn patience. But as he works through the patience and comes down to verse number 13, I want you to read with me and watch how many times he kind of says, if you really want to make it through life in a good way, and if you want to make it through this trouble, and if you want to make it through oppression, how you're going to have to do that. I'm reading at verse number 13. Is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. Is anyone cheerful? Let him sing psalms. Is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the Lord will raise him up. And if he's committed sins, they will be forgiven. Confess your trespasses one to another, and pray one for another that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed.
Sinful and displeasing to God. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Romans 3:23. If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves. 1 John 1:8. Sin can come in the form of disobedience, accusations, and ignoring God. When we sin, we suffer physical consequences, mental consequences, and yes, spiritual consequences. Sin is knowing to do good and not doing it. James 4:17. A violation of God's law. 1 John 3:4. A failure to keep God's command. 1 John 5:17. Sin is pictured as being a heavy burden, a binding debt, a blemishing stain, and an impenetrable darkness. What is grace? The dictionary defines grace as something that is unearned, undeserving, and unmerited. One author is quoted as saying, "It's that quality in the heart of God that causes Him not to deal with us according to our